Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, March 23rd, 2020 Sports Writing Lecture, the first day that USD is moving to online classes here these next couple of weeks. Essentially, what I'll do for any lectures that we record via Zoom, and I'll talk about the class and lecture format here in the next few minutes, but any lectures that we do have, I'll always give the day and topic. And so if for some reason you can't watch the lecture right as it opens at 8 a.m., or if you're watching it a few hours or a day later, I'll always give the day and topic of what we are talking about. Today's lecture is going to go over kind of where we're going to be at here in the next couple of weeks for class assignments and moving forward, as well as introducing your feature or profile story that I'll talk about here throughout the lecture, certainly in the next few minutes or so, but that is where we will be for today's lecture. First and foremost, what I do want to talk about is make sure, I hope you all are well. Make sure you're staying safe and healthy. If you're not in Vermilion, stay where you are. Don't travel to Vermilion or USD just to come back to campus. We hope that you kind of stay where you are, practice social distancing, and then we'll get through this. It's going to be a very tough and challenging time, not just for US students navigating online classes, but for us as faculty too and administrators. And so our main goals is to help you get through this. We'll get through this together. Never hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns about the class or assignments. I know some of you might be applying for media jobs or internships here in the next few weeks. I'm always happy to help you out. Review any materials that you have, any resumes, cover letters. I'm always happy to give feedback on assignments here in the course or answer any questions that you have. Stay safe, stay healthy. Your health is what's most important during this time, and we will get through this. I don't have any pictures of pets. I know some classes share pictures of pets. I don't have any, but I am a fan of sports mascots, and since this is sports writing, you'll see a lot of mascots throughout my PowerPoints. So here's Charlie Coyote, and just know that in these times we're all in this together, and I will always help you out with any questions that you have. So real quick, setting up these next couple of weeks, what I want to talk to you about is first and foremost, I'm not on campus, so I am working remotely. Again, if you're not on campus, if you're not in Vermilion, stay home, be well, be healthy. And so I'm working remotely. I'm not on campus this week. If for some reason you are on campus this week, you're probably going to notice a large decrease in the amount of students on campus, as well as the amount of faculty too. Faculty are encouraged to work remotely, work from home. And so you might see a large reduction in the amount of students and faculty that are on campus. As a result of that, I'm holding virtual office hours. These office hours will be for you to ask specific sports writing questions, questions about any assignments. Like I said, if you are applying for jobs or internships, I'm happy to review things as well. Just as a quick note, so my virtual office hours are going to be Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I'm adding Friday as a day to meet to go over anything. I notice there's two specific times. First time from 11 a.m. to noon. It's during our normal class time. That will be mainly reserved for sports writing questions. If you have specific questions about the course, about assignments, this time is kind of reserved for us as a class to, if you need to talk about anything or if you want me to clarify anything, this time will be set aside for you. If you have multiple classes with me, you'll probably notice that in each class, part of my office hours are going to be when we normally meet. And so I want to reserve that time for you to ask specific course questions. I also have office hours. Not sure if this will be cut off on your screen since I can see myself in the camera here giving a lecture. But if you can't read this for some reason, my other office hours are my normal times, 1 to 3 p.m. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so that's more of a general overall office hours times, but still, if that time works best for you, make an appointment, email me, let me know, and I'm always happy to help you out, answer any questions. There's going to be several ways you can contact me for virtual office hours. One is by email. Notice my email. If you haven't emailed me before, it's kyle.j.miller@usd.edu. Sometimes in Outlook, it will pop up my old student email, Or since I was a student at Iowa and Iowa used the same email system, it might even pop up my University of Iowa email. Um, those may or may not work, probably not. And so if you need to get a hold of me, here's my USD email. What I will suggest is email works best for any short type of questions. So you have one question about the assignment, or if you have a quick question that can be answered right away in a few minutes, email is going to probably work best for that. Um, Allow a little bit more time for a response. I will always try to get back to you as much as I can. But if for some reason there's a little bit of a delay, just kind of account for that if you email me. Another way to set up office hours or by appointment is by Google Hangouts. For these next three options, these are going to be for any type of longer type questions. If you need to discuss multiple things about an assignment, or multiple questions about where we're at with the course schedule, or any advice for stories, things like that, these next three options are probably going to work best. And like I said, I'll talk about how to set up appointments, but these will probably work for you if you have more detailed type questions that might not be able to be answered quickly in an email. So the first one is Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts is free, so Google accounts are free as well. So if you don't have one, I would suggest setting one up just as an alternate email. Google Hangouts, if you don't have, it's hangouts.google.com. You may have to download something in Google just to make sure it actually works for video, audio, chats, messaging, things like that. But that's another way to get a hold of me. My Google email, there's a lot of Kyle Millers in the world, so I had to get a little creative with my email, but it's kyle.jos.miller@gmail.com. I am happy to set up a Google Hangouts appointment with you during these office hours, or by appointment too. If you're busy working or taking care of family or friends, or working on other classes, and perhaps maybe these hours don't work on certain days, I'm always happy to set up an appointment to talk with you. Same thing with Zoom. Of course, you're going to see a lot of Zoom recordings here these next couple of weeks with lectures, meetings, things like that. I'm happy to meet by appointment to go over anything over Zoom in terms of, again, questions, clarifications, that sort of thing. I'm also happy to meet individually. So if you want to set up a one-on-one meeting, or by groups. So if you're talking with your classmates, or if you want to eventually set up maybe a class-wide meeting that if anybody wants to join in, they can join in. I'm happy to set that up. Whatever you think works best for you, or if you're talking in groups, or talking amongst the class and you're thinking, hey, maybe he could cover this, this, or this, just let me know and I'm happy to set up those appointments. Finally, if for some reason these maybe don't work, if you're in an area or at home and you might not have Wi-Fi or a strong internet connection, a cell phone can work best too on a case-by-case basis. If you need to quick call me via phone, or send a quick text and say, hey, I have this quick question. What do you think about this, this, or this in terms of the class or assignments? I'm always happy to help out. So that could be on a case-by-case basis, by appointment. Basically, just let me know what works best for you, given the certain types of questions or situations you have with the assignment or the course, and I'm happy to help you out. Again, I'm working remotely. I'm not on campus this week, but don't let that stop you from asking questions. Don't hesitate to email me, set up a meeting. I'm always happy to help you out with any assignments or anything here coming up these next couple of weeks. One thing I do want to remind you of, and this is true for if you're covering assignments for this course, for any class, and just any time in this day-to-day life here these next couple of weeks, remember to practice social distancing. These are recommendations from the CDC, from state, federal organizations, but they are very, very useful in curbing the effects of this virus. This is a very kind of scary time with this virus. It's a very contagious type of virus. And so practicing social distancing is real. Make sure you allow 6 feet between you and anybody else in public. And more importantly, if you're not in Vermilion right now, if you're thinking, well, maybe I'll make a trip here next week or the weekend, things like that, I advise you don't. I advise you stay home, be happy, be healthy, be well, uh, take care of family and friends. You know, stay home if you're not going to be actually in Vermilion right now. Another mascot photo, mascot singing in YMD arena. Practice social distancing. It's a very serious and challenging time, and that's one of the ways to help combat this virus too. So again, if you're not in Vermilion, and this is true for any assignments, things like that, I'll work with you. If you're not, if you're working from home, stay safe and stay healthy. One thing I do remind you, you might hear a lot these next couple of weeks about from different professors about synchronous versus asynchronous type of lectures. These are discussions we've had in academia about what these concepts mean and things like that. For the purposes of this course, what I'm going to do is I will have lectures be asynchronous. What that means is they're not going to be held at a specific time. I'm happy to meet with you on a case-by-case basis over Google or Zoom or things like that. But in terms of lectures for this class, we are not going to have a specific required meeting at 11 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. What lectures will do is if we have lectures, I will post them by 8 a.m. the day we have the lecture. And I would highly suggest you watch the lecture either right away or within a couple hours of it being posted. Um, I know I mentioned a few minutes ago, if you watch it the next day or things like that, I'd advise you watch it the day it's posted. That way you can get a head start on any assignments or concepts that we cover. And if you have any questions, that way there's more time I can go through and answer those for you. So we'll have lectures posted. They'll be recorded like this one, and they'll be posted by 8 a.m. When the day on our schedule it says that we're going to have a lecture, but it's not going to be held at a specific time. We are going to have a condensed course schedule. Keep in mind that these next couple weeks and even going back to face-to-face classes, we're going to probably condense a lot of things down in the course. We won't cover every single class, lecture, or assignment that's listed in the syllabus. We're going to cover some. So keep that in mind. We're still going to have some assignments here these next couple weeks, but just also keep in mind that not all in-class assignments or reading or news quizzes are going to be covered this semester. So if you're wondering about different points in the course, I will keep you updated on what will be covered, what won't. So just kind of keep that in mind again. For these next couple of weeks, we are only going to cover the feature or profile story. And I'll talk about the assignment requirements for that here in a couple of minutes. So these next couple of weeks, just the feature or profile story. Since we are online only, I want to allow for some extra time for you to complete the assignment. So we're not going to rush through multiple assignments. We're just going to stick to one here for these next couple of weeks or so. Do keep in mind too, this is a very fluid and changing situation. As I'm sure you've seen from the news coverage, things related to the coronavirus, different state, federal regulations, different guidelines, how many people are allowed in meetings and closing of businesses and restaurants. It's a very fluid situation that seems to change hourly or daily sometimes. So you're going to want to check your email and D2L often. That is how I will send out updates for the course, whether it's D2L news items. If it is specific things I need to get out right away and I just send everybody an email list through Outlook, check it often. Have ways that you can get D2L notifications through your email. So that way, if things do change last minute, we can let you know. If you've never taken a course with me before, keep in mind that any changes that I make to a course are going to be in your benefit. I'm going to work through the best ways to make sure it's in your best interest or in your benefit as we move forward in the class. So real quick, I'm going to go through this week's schedule. So today will be the feature profile story. We'll talk about the assignment. We've already covered some of the MCOM 215 class information for these upcoming next couple weeks. What we're going to talk about Wednesday is pitch and story prep. That will not be a lecture, but that'll be through virtual office hours, okay? So we'll have set aside that time for any, if you want to set up a meeting to discuss your story pitch that we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. If you want to work on your stories and email me any questions you have about that, that is perfectly fine. That's what these virtual office hours are going to be for. Thursday, the feature profile pitch will be due by 11:59 p.m. I will talk about that in a couple of minutes, but just kind of keep that in mind. You'll have a few days here to work on it, but that will be something due this week. Friday, again, we will talk about your feature profile story. It'll be a work day. There will be no lectures, but I'm happy to meet to go over any questions you have about the assignment. And again, those virtual office hours are 11 a.m. to noon and 1 to 3 p.m. today, Wednesday, and Friday. So to start real quick, I want to talk about what is a feature or profile story. And I know a lot of you, when you worked on maybe your leads assignment, certainly the lead and nut graphs, you tried to take a bit of a feature approach to the story. It was still a game approach or something kind of held to a rigid type of topic in sports, but you tried to maybe come up with a creative emotional hook for that. A feature profile story basically takes that emotional approach and has it all the way throughout the story. So one thing I want you to do this week is to read, and I'll post this to D2L. Austin Lammers just wrote a fantastic feature profile story about Joni Friedel and her husband Mike. They were here in Vermilion, and I want you to read that story. And while you're reading the story, I really want you to think about the story format and how specifically feature and profile stories in sports cover sports, but then also cover a strong emotional hook and a strong emotional topic, and just kind of see how Austin worked his way through the story, how he used different parts of the Friedel story, how he approached different types of topics, how he used transitions. And think about that with your overall format, because his example that he wrote a few weeks ago, and like I said, it's a fantastic, wonderful story, will help you when you're thinking about your feature or profile stories. Again, I want you to think about the approach of it. What's the topic? How did it draw you into the story from an emotional angle? There's going to be a USD Vermilion side to it too. That always plays a role in different types of stories. How can you relate from maybe, say, a university or alma mater or city where you're based type of format? But then also think about maybe for people who are outside of Vermilion or outside of USD, how the approach would draw somebody like that into your story, because that is exactly what a feature or profile tries to do. And then think about the newsworthiness. Many times in feature or profile stories, it's a very newsworthy topic, but it's not going to be really held to timeliness or a real hard hitting day to day type of story. It's going to be more of a broader times of time range, but then also it's going to be a lot heavier on the emotional appeal and human interest, the impact or magnitude, the proximity or prominence. It's going to be other types of those news elements that we've talked about throughout the semester that's going to really hit home the newsworthiness of the story. So that's what I want you to think about with Austin's story this week. Read it before, I would suggest read it before you start thinking about topics that you want to cover for this assignment, which we'll talk about the specific requirements coming up. I would say read it before you maybe think about topics you want to cover, and see if that doesn't help you with certain topics that might lend a good approach to a future profile story. When you cover feature or profile stories, one of the things you want to think about is what's the compelling nature. What's maybe those one or two topics that um, have that strong emotional hook, maybe have a strong impact or magnitude, whether it's personal wise, community wise, sport wise. Think about what makes that story compelling, and if there's any conflict. When we talk about conflict as a news value, it can be team versus team, USD versus SDSU, Iowa versus Iowa State, Nebraska versus Oklahoma. It can be, conflict within a game, but then it can also mean, emotional conflict, magnitude of conflicts, different types of things like that. So think about that when you get into a feature or profile story, is what are topics that are compelling? Is there any conflict? Does that conflict drive the story? And then certainly what I want you to think about for this class is you're going to have about 2 weeks to cover the assignment, give or take. What can you cover in that amount of time? And what that means is think of some feasible topics you can cover within that 10 to 14 days. Don't really try to look at long investigative feature types of profiles, because there might not be enough time to cover that. So kind of when you're thinking about your pitches, what's something that you could maybe be able to cover in that week and a half, 2-week time frame, something that's compelling if there's any conflict within your stories. What I want you to also think about is the amount of detail. And you're going to notice this in Austin's story. He has incredible, minute amounts of detail that are powerful aspects of his story that really hit home in an emotional level, makes you want to keep moving forward, keep reading. You really understand what the people are impacted and what the people are going through in a particular situation. So think detail. When we covered leads and nut graphs, when we brought in that example of the Creighton University basketball team visiting an elderly fan, notice how small details it covered. It talked about how many games she had attended, it talked about how long she was a fan, where she lived, the fact that she couldn't get to games anymore. Those small, minute details matter, and you need to make them matter. So you want to have small details. A lot of times those are really good for a soft lead, an emotional hook going into the nut graph of your story. But you also need to make sure that that small detail has a clear significance. Why does it matter in the story? Don't just put in detail just to put in detail. You saw a little bit of that with some game recaps in terms of any types of feedback or when you're at games. Did this stat matter? Did this stat matter? Same is really kind of true in a feature or profile story. Small, minute details, but then also constantly think about why this matters in the story. If I put this in the story, is it going to make sense? Will my reader need to know it to follow along? Or is it something that I'm just including as filler that I could and probably should take out to make sure that my reader can still clearly follow along? Feature and profile stories also give a lot of emotion. It's a soft story. It's a human interest story. It's that emotional appeal story. And a lot of times, emotion hooks the non-sports reader. Austin's story, again, is going to be a really good look at that in terms of it's at its heart a sports story. Coach Friedel was a coach on the USD football team, um, but it goes beyond sports. It talks about personal adversity, and it talks about the role of family and the role of community. Those elements anybody can relate to, whether they're sports fans or not. So when you're looking at a feature or profile, think the emotional side. If you gave this to somebody who was not a sports fan whatsoever, would they still be drawn into your message? Would they still be hooked into reading further your story? Finally, again, think about the newsworthiness. Why are you covering it now? So there's that time relevancy, newsworthiness there. Why do we care? Again, that's answering that so what question. Why should we care about the topic, about the person profile, about maybe a feature on a business that was hit hard with the coronavirus? Buffalo Wild Wings during the NCAA tournament. Our local chains in Sioux Falls or Sioux City or Yankton, are they impacted with maybe the lack of customers coming in? Things like that. Why do we care? What's the impact or significance? What's the most important, compelling part of that story? And then finally, think about what don't we know? And it goes beyond just USD's in Vermilion or Buffalo Wild Wings is in Sioux Falls and Sioux City. Think about what don't we know? What haven't we heard before about an athlete? About maybe a sports restaurant, about maybe um, international student athletes who maybe can't go home or are here, or things like that. What don't we know about the person or about the situation that, again, is going to compel us forward, maybe a little bit of conflict, but drive the heart of your story? In any story that you cover, whether it's feature profile, game recaps, and you got some practice with this with your game recap too, you want to have multiple perspectives. When you stick to one interview, yes, you have a story, but you really only have one side of the story. You're only telling one piece of the puzzle. With multiple perspectives, at least two, maybe more. You'll find out with your feature profile assignment. The requirements could be 2 interviews. Spoiler, 2 interviews at least, but have more if you think it's needed. If you have 3 or 4 interviews and you're thinking, what, this really tells a well-rounded story, go for it. Have those multiple perspectives. Think who you're interviewing and why. What do they give to the story? Again, what's that compelling information, that emotional interview that's going to drive your story, make somebody who, whether they're a sports fan or not, continuously read further. If it's an athlete profile, think about teammates, think about coaches. If it's more of a feature story, so a profile story, and we'll talk about this again here in a few minutes. Profile story is going to be more person based. You're talking personal adversity. You're talking a personal approach to it. Um, who specifically is affected. Specific Coyote women's basketball players who won the Summit League tournament, but they can't go to the NCAA tournament. Coaches who can't go out and recruit right now because the NCAA has banned recruiting because of the coronavirus until I think mid-April. And so thinking of that personal side, adversity, what have people had to overcome? What have teams had to overcome? Think about it that way when you're talking about a profile story. If you're talking about a feature, business owners are more of a profile. If you're talking to somebody who owns a sports bar in Sioux City, and their big money maker is March Madness or NCAA wrestling championships or basketball, and they personally are affected, that's a profile story. If you want to look at the business overall, a Buffalo Wild Wings or the Hard Rock Casino or USD in general from the athletic standpoint, that's going to be more of a feature. You're taking a softer approach on a wider range topic. So kind of keep that in mind. Same thing with a feature. You want multiple perspectives, different owners, different customers, um, different athletes, different coaches, different personnel. Always think along those lines. Who are you covering? Is there any adversity they've had to overcome? Certainly now, with a lot of things going on with the coronavirus, certainly now there's going to be a lot of adversity, a lot of conflict too in your stories. Kind of think about that when you're going through your pitches and you're starting to write your story. Another main thing you want to think about is always do your research. Ask questions. Um, know about your topic going into any interviews or going into when you're actually writing your story. Don't go in cold and just think, well, I'm going to write about this. And then the first thing that you actually do is just start asking questions during an interview. You want to be prepared. So do background research beforehand. Think about what's your topic. What are some details that you may have to put in to your story, whether it's stats or records or things like that. Always ask questions with your interviews. If you don't ask, they might not say anything. So always ask questions. Remember when we talked about interviewing, open-ended questions are best. Be respectful, be professional, ask open-ended questions. How do you feel about this? Or how do you think this? Or can you tell me about this? Or what do you think was maybe the most fun part of the Summit League tournament? Or what was the biggest moment in the USD SDSU game? Or what are you going to miss most about playing on the Coyotes team if they are graduating seniors? Things like that. Do your research, ask compelling questions. That will help drive your story too. Like we said, start with something we don't know. That will hook us into the story. If you start with something that we've already heard 1,000 times, the NCAA tournaments are canceled. We know USD won the Summit League championship in women's basketball. We know the USD men's team lost to North Dakota in the Summit League championship. We know there's not going to be any wrestling championships or March Madness bracket challenges or things like that. We all know that. Start with something we don't know because that's going to hook us into reading further. If immediately we read something fresh, unique, new, now we're hooked. And now we're going to keep moving forward rather than maybe just glancing through the first paragraph of the story. Anytime you write a feature or profile, you always want to think about the character and setting, a fully developed character. When you read Austin's profile story about the Fried Owls, you're going to see a well-developed character, daily life, adversity, conflict. That also draws us into the story. It's not just a so-and-so did this and then we move on. It's that minute detail that's newsworthy, that's compelling, that's relevant, that makes a well-rounded story. Again, detailed setting. Don't just say there are 8,000 fans at the Premiere Center when you're writing a feature story. Are there super fans there? What's the emotion of the game? Um, if it's an empty sports bar, so and so was planning to have 300 people at a sports bar to watch March Madness, and now it's empty. Or so and so looks out amongst the tables that aren't going to be filled these next couple of weeks because of this, this, and this. You want that detailed setting because, again, that minute focus helps draw that story further and compels us into reading more. So your actual story, and again, I'm not sure if the right side of the PowerPoint is going to be cut off or not, but your feature or profile story, again, profile, personal look. You're writing a story about a person. Feature, you may be writing a story about the team, about maybe USC athletics in general, about a sports business, about a restaurant or a casino, something related to sports. That's more of a feature type of story. Your feature or profile story is going to be due at 11:59 p.m. April 7th. So you're going to have more than a couple weeks to work on the story. What the story is 400 to 450 words, a feature or profile, about the same length as a normal Vermont story. So if you're reading the Vermont stories, those tend to run about 300 to 500 words or so. This is going to be about 400 to 450. So kind of use that as a guide. When you're pitching your stories, if you are in Vermilion, if you are on campus, and you cover USD Vermilion stories, that's perfectly fine. We'll talk about interviews here in a little bit. If you'd like to cover it for more of an email phone interview side, that's perfectly fine if you take a USD Vermilion approach. Or your hometown or where based. I know some of you are from Sioux Falls, Sioux City, Rapid City. You can look at that for your feature profile story too. Whatever is easiest for you, what you think are the most compelling stories, and I will work with you on that with your pitch, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. So you can either take a USD Vermilion approach or your hometown wherever based. Keep in mind at least 2 interviews. You can have more. If for some reason you have a lot of interest with your story topic and you want to interview 3, 4 people, that's perfectly fine. But at least 2. You can't write a 400, 450 word story with 1 interview and expect to tell everything newsworthy or compelling, because there's always going to be a part of that story that's going to be missing. So at least 2 interviews. A mix of direct and indirect quotes. There might not be a set limit of direct or indirect quotes. But what I want you to do, don't focus everything on direct quotes. Don't just have paragraphs upon paragraphs of direct quotes and then just maybe a couple sentences here or there tying everything together. That's not a story. You're just basically taking interviews and you're plopping them into a Word document. On the flip side, don't just paraphrase everything and have little one sentence, yeah, it was fun type direct quotes. That's also really not telling the story. Have a mix throughout. See Austin's story. See how he takes information, balances with direct quotes, uses transitions, uses subheads to go through everything. I would suggest, especially working remotely, but in general, whenever you go out and interview people, ask if you can record them. What that's going to do is it's going to give you a file you can go back and listen and have accurate sound bites and information. So record interviews if you can. If you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to talk to somebody, you're going to try jotting everything down, you're going to hear something compelling, get halfway through writing down a direct quote, forget what they said, they keep talking going forward, and now you're lost. And now it's kind of a snowball effect that's going to affect your story. So record interviews for sound bites and information. Ask them beforehand, see if it's okay. Tell them it's just an audio recording is perfectly fine. No video, no anything like that. You can record on your iPhone or Android too. A lot of those have the voice memos recording systems. Ask them and then just say, hey, can I record to go back, listen to information, make sure all the sound bites are correct, anything like that. Because of the coronavirus restrictions, and this is something I really, really, really want to stress, phone or email interviews. You need to avoid face-to-face contact. That's what we talked about social distancing for, having 6 feet between somebody. Avoid face-to-face contact. Stick to phone or email interviews. If you are covering a USD story, you're going to need to work with the SIDs. Do they have restrictions on, are they allowing interviews right now? Are there restrictions on, access to specific types of sports? You're going to want to email them, find out from them any guidance they have, and then that will adjust your story accordingly. Stress that these interviews would take place over email or the phone. Really work with your SIDs if you're working on USD stories, and they can help give you some sort of information for what will be feasible, what you can do, what you can't, covering stories. Same thing if you're covering high schools, things like that. Email, talk to the athletic director, activities directors, find out again what's going to be feasible, any type of restrictions they have for these next couple weeks covering your story. Remember AP style and inverted pyramid structure. Remember the AP styles we've covered so far. I will upload a guide to D2L, and I will email out when I upload the guide for you for AP style, just kind of an overview of different types of rules, reminders for you. Also keep in mind the inverted pyramid structure. You've all done really, really well talking about the most important to least important information. Keep that in mind, especially with a story. You don't want the most compelling part in the middle or at the end, because you can't really assume your readers are going to read that far. Again, think about the newsworthiness of your story. Who and why? That's going to be answered a lot in the pitch, and we'll talk about the pitch here in a couple minutes. But think about who and why. Who do you want to cover? What do you want to cover? And why is it important? Notice, and again, the slide thing might cut off this a little bit, so I'll wait and see if it goes away. Maybe, maybe not. The total amount of points with the class, with the assignment for this one, for your feature or profile, is going to be 100. What that means is there's more points to gain. However, it does mean there's going to be more points to lose in terms of AP style errors, spelling errors, grammar errors, quote formatting errors. All of that will result in point deductions because we've covered a lot of those examples before. You have a lot of my feedback from past assignments. And so with 100 points, I'm going to be looking for sound AP writing, spelling, grammar, compelling stories, decent transitions between stories, not just jumping from one topic to the next with not a lot of story flow in terms of how you're going from point A to point B to point C. So keep that in mind, it's worth 100 points. Make sure you submit as a Word document. The reason why that's important is a lot of times in Word documents, I will highlight different things in your story. What's going well, what are some things to improve on, or what are some point deductions. And so in a Word document, it's much easier to give you that feedback. In a PDF, it's much tougher. So upload as a Word document to D2L. So real quick again, 400 to 450 words. It can be USD Vermilion or your hometown based. At least 2 interviews, a solid mix of direct and indirect quotes. Don't lean heavier towards one side or the other. Have as much of a balance as you can. Keep in mind direct quotes, that compelling information you can't really paraphrase. Indirect quotes, things you can paraphrase, things that you can kind of sum up that's still important, still attribute to your interviewees or any type of outside sources, but you don't have any direct quotes. Again, record interviews for soundbites information. Ask them beforehand, see if it's okay to record them. Keep in mind phone or email interviews. Avoid face-to-face contact. Make sure you are contacting, communicating with our SIDs, with activities directors, athletic directors from the high school level in terms of how to contact for interviews, what things or any restrictions they may have during these next couple of weeks. AP style inverted pyramid structure, we've talked about that. Newsworthiness, we've talked about that as well. And again, it's worth 100 points. Upload as a Word document to D2L. And the deadline is 11:59 p.m., Friday, April 7th. So your pitch. Your pitch is due this week. And the reason why is because you want to have your pitch sound. Talk to me about your topic. Use any feedback I give you about your topic. So that way you still have more than enough time to cover your story. So your feature or profile pitch, that's going to be worth 20 points. Essentially, if you answer all of these questions within the word count, proper spelling and grammar, don't misspell coyotes or don't misspell a coach's name or interview's name, you'll probably get most, if not all, 20 points. I'm not going to take off in terms of a story idea unless it's completely off the wall, or if you just give me one sentence, then there's going to be some point deductions. But let's talk about your stories. So pitch ideas for a feature or profile story and why. If you have a topic in mind, great, pitch it. If you're debating between a couple topics, go ahead and pitch the couple topics. What I'll do is I'll read through both, and I can give suggestions in terms of whether both work, if one is maybe a little more feasible than the other or a little more of a compelling story than the other, and I can help you out through that. In 200 or 250 words, answer the newsworthiness, why the story is newsworthy and why, the significance, what are you adding, what's compelling, what's different or unique that hasn't been covered before. So say you want to do a profile on Coach Plitzuite. She's covered in the media all the time. What can you tell me that's different? Or Kira Duffy. She's covered in the media all the time. What can you tell me what's different? So think unique, different approaches to covering a story. The bench warmer on the team. A little known popular restaurant in Sioux Falls or Sioux City that was really looking forward to the NCAA tournament or things like that, then now all of a sudden is debating, can they stay open? Do they have a successful business model moving forward? Things like that. Think about the newsworthiness and significance. Have an idea in mind for interviews or topics. You don't have to really know exactly, I'm going to interview this person, this person, this person yet. Have some rough ideas for who you'd like to interview, or different types of professions you like to interview, coach or athlete on a team, business owner, things like that. You'll upload by 11:59 p.m. this Thursday, March 26th, okay? You'll get feedback Friday. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be a quick turnaround. Am I going to review these at 12:01 a.m. Friday morning? No. But you'll get feedback, Friday mid-morning, afternoon by the latest, within that 24-hour time frame, so you can work on your stories. Again, think either USD or Vermilion, or your hometown if you're working remotely. Again, you're going to hear me say this a lot here these next couple of weeks. If you're already in Vermilion, okay. If you're not in Vermilion, stay home, stay healthy, stay safe. Don't travel to Vermilion just to be on campus or stop in the UR Center or things like that. Stay where you're at and stay healthy. Okay, so again, what's upcoming this week? I want you to read Austin's Medium story that I'll post to D2L. I'll also send in an email corresponding to this lecture. So you're going to get the link to the lecture. You'll also get the link to his story. Read that. It's an excellent, excellent feature profile story. And so that will really, really help you in terms of kind of what we're looking for story topics and format-wise for this assignment. Also this week, you're going to read chapter 4 in the textbook. If you don't have the textbook, that is fine. If for some reason your textbook is in your dorm room or down in Vermilion, or you left it at home or things like that, I will provide a summary and guide on D2L for the textbook. So that's perfectly okay. That will also be on D2L. Wednesday, again, just virtual office hours. We're not going to have any lectures, just some feature profile story or work on your pitch. Again, I'm happy to talk about anything, talk about story ideas during those virtual office hours. Friday, again, will be a work day. No lecture, but it's going to be one of several work days we're going to have on this assignment. Again, during the virtual office hours, I'm happy to talk about your story, anything you want me to either read over or anything you want me to talk about the story format or ideas or outlines or anything like that. That's what those virtual office hours are going to be. So Wednesday, some discussion if you would like on your story topics or pitch. Friday, again, work day, any discussions you'd like to have about your feature profile story. And again, just a reminder, those virtual office hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 a.m. to noon, 1 to 3 p.m. Again, the 11 a.m. to noon, really set aside for sports writing specific questions. That's here for all of us as a class. to, if you have things you want me to cover again, if you want any clarifications or things about the assignment or the course moving forward, that time is set aside for us, 1 to 3 p.m., my overall office hours. I'm happy to meet by appointment too. Again, you can reach me via email, um, short types of questions, things I can answer pretty quickly during office hours. If there's anything more specific you'd like to talk about, or maybe multiple things you'd like to talk about, that's where Google Hangouts, Zoom, even just calling on the phone can really help out in those cases. I'll have a little more time. And a lot of times, too, with many questions or many detailed questions about the assignment or the course, it's almost better to talk about that conversationally, face to face, as opposed to trying to answer everything in one email. So, again, email, Google Hangouts, Zoom, cell phone, that's all how you can reach me during virtual office hours. Finally, this is the end of the lecture. Just a reminder, any questions at all, I'm here for you. We're going to get through this. Stay strong. Again, stay healthy. If you're not in Vermilion, don't travel to Vermilion. Um, you know, we're all in this together these next couple of weeks. I know it's going to be at times very tough, very challenging, but I'm here for you. And I'm here to help you succeed. And any questions you have, don't hesitate to reach out. That will conclude today's lecture. Again, watch your email in D2L for any course updates or assignment updates. But again, have a wonderful Monday. Have a good week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will talk to you soon.